Hello, hello, I am Merkaba18. Today I'm bringing you another extraction in-depth operator guide with IQ. IQ is a really interesting operator, in some ways bad and in some ways good. So I personally will just go ahead and state for the record that I think IQ is the weakest operator in Rainbow Six Extraction. There may be some that disagree with that, and I won't say that she is completely useless, because that is not the truth. But I will say that she is one of the weakest for a number of different reasons. You can make a case perhaps for another operator here or there, one of which we still have not yet done an operator guide on, but for my money, I think IQ is one of the weakest. So let's talk about why that is at the set here. Look at her speed is the fastest in the game, or one of the fastest in the game, but her armor is one of the lowest in the game. And so what you end up with is IQ is incredibly fragile, probably the most fragile operator in the entire game. And her kit really doesn't do a whole lot. The only redeeming quality that she has is that her guns are pretty great. Her IQ scan has its uses. It certainly is useful. But given how fragile she is, I think that she can make the case for one of the weakest operators. I don't quite understand why they decided to give her the lowest armor, considering that she is a intelligence gatherer and a recon scanner. I don't know why. Maybe because she's so fast, that is why she's so fragile. But she can take a lot of damage in a quick succession. So we'll talk about that more in the in-depth video in-game footage here in just a minute. But let's go ahead and talk about her ultimate. Her ultimate is a red MK4 Spectre, detects react equipment and more through obstacles. And that will evolve as we progress through this menu here. I will tell you all the things that she can detect. But the big thing that you want to keep in mind is things like med kits, ammo boxes, React Tech boxes, and ability recharge boxes will automatically be detected through her scanner. There's some details to go into and some advanced tips with her Spectre, but I'll get into that in the in-game footage. So with level 2, you get the ability to scan spores, sower mines, arc spines, and nutrient nodes through the Spectre. So that will give you some information about some of the objectives. It will also detect any kind of spore or sower mines. That's a really important upgrade there. It makes it pretty strong in certain circumstances, and we'll talk about more of that in the in-game footage. At level 3, she gets an arsenal update. I know I almost never use shotguns, so I don't really have much to say about this specific gun. At level 4, you get a really weak upgrade to her armor. Incoming damage reduced by 10%. So prior to this, she is even squishier than she is at the end. And I'm not sure why they only gave her 10% reduction. She is, I think, the most fragile operator. The only one that comes close, I think, is Vigil. And that it honestly makes no sense to me why that is, because Vigil, there's a reason Vigil should be fragile. His ability and his kit is unmatched in the game, in my opinion, and he should take more damage than the average operator. But IQ, her ult is not great, and the utility that it brings to the table does not warrant so much damage intake. And so I hope at some point they'll rework this, but at the timing of this video, that you get 10%. So that's what you get. And then at level 5, you get another like weird weak upgrade. This is essentially sort of like you carry 3 additional magazines per weapon, which means you're basically given a free gear slot. That is one of the worst gear slots in the entire game as a gadget. We'll talk about that more here in just a second. But this is one of the least useful perks, in my opinion, especially since ammo is so prevalent throughout all of the different ways that you'll play this game. Maelstrom, Veteran, you can maybe make a case that it's most useful in Veteran, but and there's certain circumstances where you're going to want to have that extra ammo, but it's just a weak upgrade, in my opinion. At level 6, you get a primary update with the MP7 and the Commando, both of which are pretty great. We'll talk about her loadout here in just a minute. High frequency at level 7, which means she will now detect lurkers and smashers while using the Spectre, regardless of their cloaking ability. That last part is really, really important because if you have cloaked lurkers or cloaked mutation and the smashers are cloaked, it's going to detect them regardless. And so then you can ping them and demonstrate, hey, there's a really important enemy you need to pay attention to. So this is where the utility of her Spectre starts to gain a little bit, but it's still not quite on par with most of the other operators. At level 8, you get a big boost to her speed. I wish that they would have taken some of this and given it to her as an armor upgrade. But again, that's just what they did. So there it is. Level 9, you get what I think is her best gun, in my opinion, the G8A1 light machine gun. It is only one of a couple of mag-fed LMGs, and I think this is her best gun. It is one of the better guns in the game, in my opinion, because it has such a fast reload speed. We'll talk about more of that here in just a minute. And at level 10, you get a really important upgrade for her IQ scanner. It will now detect apexes and proteans while using the Spectre, regardless of the cloaking ability. The proteans one is not quite as important because most of the time the protean is going to find you, but you certainly want to know where apexes are. And if you don't know where they are and you happen to just turn a corner and there's like 3 of them or 1 of them even, you're going to want to know that. And so that's a really important upgrade. It is a little bit of a redeeming quality there. But her detection range is also increased, which is a welcome upgrade. So I will say that her utility at max level does provide some benefit, but again, I just don't think it's the best ult or intelligence gathering information you can find. I will say that she is on par, or she sort of lines up with, as an intelligence gatherer with Pulse and with Lion. And she does it in a little bit of a different way. And as a result of that, it's going to take a little bit more work to master her, and her fragility in terms of how much damage she takes is going to make her much harder to use than either of those operators. And candidly, both of Lion and Pulse are going to give you more information that is going to help your team. There are certain circumstances where that's not the case, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, so as I said, her gear up slot is essentially a free ammo satchel. Basically, you deploy with a bunch of extra ammo, and this is not a great gear slot option, in my opinion. They have made they've made ammo so prevalent and so easy to find in this game that it's candidly not worth it. It's a waste of a gun slot. So you do get more ammo, which is okay, cool. I like that, but I would much rather have a different perk like gear up, or where I get an extra grenade or extra reses or faster reload speed. I don't know, anything really. So I hope that they'll rework some of her kit in the near future. I think she's one of the strongest candidates for a buff in the game, especially as it relates to how much damage she takes. So let's talk about her guns for a second. Her AUG is pretty great. It is a great weapon to use almost all the way until like the end of her progression, especially since the M87, I don't really ever use it. It is a pretty decent damage shotgun if you're into that. The MP7 is a good close to mid-range option. It has a really fast fire rate, quite a bit lower damage than the AUG, but fire rate is much higher. And as you can see, the recoil pattern is pretty similar, a little bit worse here. But and then the Commando is pretty great. I use this one, I think, a lot on Pulse. So you can put a muzzle brake on it if you're doing single shot. I would go with a compensator most of the time, and you probably want to use like the 1.5 scope here. It's a great secondary option, or a great option, all the way up until you unlock the G8. Either of these guns are going to do you a great service here. You're going to do more damage with the Commando. It's going to have a little bit of a slower fire rate, harder recoil, but it's also going to reload faster, and it's going to have the G8 is going to have a little bit more ammo capacity. So this is sort of a consistent reload if you can get that and pull that off quickly. This is mag dumping, shooting a ton of enemies at once. It really just depends on your playstyle, what you prefer. I tend to prefer the G8, so there's that. As her secondary, she only has one option, which is interesting to me, and it's the P12. You can put a silencer on here. You can put a muzzle brake. It does a decent amount of damage. And so I will say, for the record, her gun kit is pretty strong. It's pretty versatile, and you're going to be able to kind of pick and choose what you want. But the P12 is your only option as a secondary, which I find interesting. I tend to run whatever the standard kit that you're going to want to run on an average operator based on what your team needs is going to be the same with IQ. The one thing I will say is that you may not want to pair her up with a recon drone or a ammo pouch, because she's already going to have that. She's essentially an intelligence gatherer. You can make a case that there's a stronger argument for a recon drone with IQ than there is with for example, Lion or Pulse, because you're only going to get a limited amount of intel with her Spectre, but having the recon drone will give you more. And so if you're fully going in and you want to use the recon drone, I don't see any reason why not there. Just use whatever grenade your team needs, and you'll be set there. All right, so let's take a look at some of the in-game footage here in just a second, and then we'll talk more about some in-depth tips. All right, here we are in-game with a level 10 IQ. Let's talk about some basics with her. I have paired her up with a recon drone here just to demonstrate one of the ways that you can expand her kit a little bit. And I have a explosives fragmentation grenade, and I'm bringing her G8 here. As you can see, it is a mag fed. It will show you what that looks like. It can dump the clip pretty quick. As you can see, the recoil is pretty rough there. You have to spend a little bit of time learning to control that. But the reload speed is really quick for an LMG. It does a decent amount of damage, lower than the average LMG. It has a lower clip size, but the reload speed is up there as one of the fastest. Maybe the SAW is a little bit faster. But the P12 is her only secondary option, so your basic choice here is to silence it or not silence it. But that's the gun you're using as your secondary, as a default. So let's talk about some basics here, and pardon any interruption there from Ash. Rude. So one of the things that you're going to remember is that IQ is very, very fragile. And my main issue with her is that she is so fragile that you can get into a bit of a pickle without even blinking. As opposed to, for example, Vigil, who can use his ability specifically to counter his fragility and his need for to stay away from enemies. IQ really doesn't have that option. So the biggest tip that I can give you with IQ is don't get into a situation, don't be as aggressive as you want to be with other operators. Don't get yourself into a situation where you're surrounded by 5 or 6 grunts, because you will go down in a second. She's very, very fragile. I think even more fragile than Vigil is. So, and that's specifically too because of her ult. Now, her ultimate is a scanner, and I'll go ahead and pull that out. As you can see here, it sort of creates this blue light effect where you can see tech options on the field. So you can see where a med kit is, you can see where ammo is, you can see where tech is. And then even further away, you can see if there's an ability recharge. Now, she will also, at max level, detect any blinding spores so that you can avoid those. And critically, this is a really good tip. One of the ways in which IQ becomes more useful is if you have a blinding spore mutation. Any Archean that has blinding spores on them will automatically be detected by this Spectre. She will detect apexes, lurkers, and smashers as well, regardless of their cloaking ability. And so those are really good pieces of intelligence that you're going to want to know as a operator. And unlike Lion, I do think that there's a case to be made for bringing a recon drone with IQ, especially since she's so fragile. And you want to spend most of your time on IQ doing recon and giving your team information and being at the back line. That's one of the best tips that I can give you is don't play this operator like a frontline operator. You want to scan out, and that's in a specific way. This build can really help you do that because now you're scanning and getting information for your team rather than taking damage. So let's recall our drone here. One other important note here, unlike some of the other intelligence gatherers, like directly as it compares to Pulse, for example, Pulse, when he pulls his heartbeat scanner out, cannot use his weapon at the same time. So Pulse, you can then, however, can use her pistol here. And so while you have the scanner active and you're giving your team information, you can shoot things that are in your vicinity. Very important update. I think it sort of like puts her ability somewhere between Lion and Pulse as a useful, especially when she's paired with other intelligence gathering capabilities. So the biggest mistake you can make then would be to not use her scanner and to be running around using your gun and being loud. You don't want to do that with IQ because you'll cost your team. Your team's going to lose a lot of potential depth in the maelstrom, for example, and you kind of just want to give your team information and respond to that information while your team is being aggressive, if that's what they choose to do. So one other thing that I will note here with IQ is that her ability takes a second to deploy, so you want to be very mindful of that. And while it is active, you're only using your secondary. So you don't want to pull this out and then have to switch to your main gun because that'll take a second. By the time that happens, you're going to take a couple of hits, especially with faster moving Archeans like Grunts or with Spikers. So you want to be very mindful of your place on the map and where enemies are so that you're not taking any damage. Now I want to do a quick little demonstration here for you just to show you just exactly how fragile IQ is. Okay, so that one explosion did 22 damage on a smoker, and smokers tend to do the least amount of damage with a breach or gas class. So let's take a look at what this guy can do. I think this is a Storm Spiker? Yeah. So watch how much damage this Storm Spiker does. Almost 40 damage with one hit, which is way more than the average operator. So as you can see, with just 2 hits, we have taken all the way down into our essentially our base damage white health here. So you want to be very careful. And one of the things that can help you and remember with IQ is that she is very, very fast. So that can be both a benefit and a detriment. If you're playing her aggressive, you can get yourself into a situation where you can't get out of it faster than you can respond to it. And on the same side of the opposite side of the same coin, you can end up in a scenario where you're playing her a little bit more passively. You have your scanner out, and you can kind of run away a little bit faster than the average operator and get out of a pickle. So as long as you're playing her as in a passive style, you're gonna do better with IQ than you would if you play her aggressively. So that is basically it with Mrs. IQ. I do hope that her gun kit makes her one of the better gun kits in the game. Her ability does have a really interesting niche, and it is quite specific. There are only certain circumstances in which you're gonna truly maximize the benefit of IQ here. I think she's probably one of the weaker operators overall, and I hope at some point they at least give her a little bit more damage reduction so that you can play her, because as it stands right now, you have to play her in a very passive, very niche style, and it just does not personally fit me very well, and I don't think it fits the game very well. So there's that. Please remember to subscribe to the channel here. If you like these videos, make sure to comment below and like the video. I am also live Monday through Thursday at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. We do in-depth Maelstrom guides. We play with viewers. We have all kinds of fun. We do goofy challenge runs and stuff like that. So please make sure to check out the YouTube or the Twitch channel over at Mercaba18. There is a link to that in the description. I'm going to link to some other videos here with other guides for operators in this game. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate your support, and see you again next time.